Hello everyone and welcome to another video. It takes money to make money, right? For example, if you want to build a successful theme park, you will need some sort of starting capital. Or do you? What if you started out with no money at all? Could you still beat the game? Can you beat RollerCoaster Tycoon 1 and 2 while starting with a completely empty bank account in every scenario? This is a list of all 146 scenarios in RollerCoaster Tycoon 1 and 2 combined, and in this video I'm going to try to beat all of them with no starting funds at all. So at the start of every scenario I will use a cheat to set the available cash to 0, and I won't change the loan, so I can't get money that way either. Some scenarios, such as Diamond Heights, will be easy, as you start with a thriving theme park. Others though, like Victoria Falls, might be a bit trickier as you start with barely anything. There are a couple of scenarios, such as Extreme Heights, where money is entirely disabled. To prevent these from not counting, I will use another cheat to enable money in these scenarios and see what parameters we get. In Extreme Heights specifically, you'll see that you have 110,000 euros in the bank when you do this, although for this challenge that will of course disappear. I will be using OpenRCT2 for this video, as that makes it much easier to do and record everything, but I have made sure that all the solutions I offer do also work in RCT1 and 2 vanilla. Now, I'm not going to beat all 146 scenarios one by one, that would be way too much work and would be very repetitive. This is because only the start is actually different from standard play, as once you're making money you can play it like you'd normally do. With this in mind, we can immediately eliminate more than half of all the scenarios. If you can charge for the park entry and are allowed to advertise, making money from scratch is really quite simple. First, lower the park entry fee to 0 so that guests spawn faster. Because you have no rides, you're already overcharging even if you're just charging €1, which lowers the guest spawning frequency. Once a guest has spawned, check how much cash they have on them and set the entry price to exactly that. Even though your park is still entirely empty, they will pay whatever you set it to once they have spawned, as long as they can afford it. After they've entered the park, you can repeat the cycle until you have $100. Then you can afford to buy 2 weeks of ads advertising half off park entrance fee. This will spawn in many guests, and you can even double the fee now to still get a lot per guest, as they all get half off. Some of these scenarios have a requirement to never let your park rating go below 700, for which you have until April 28th year 1 to get it above 700 for the very first time. Usually with this strategy it takes less than a month to get the advertisements rolling, after which you can quickly build a cheap ride and hire some entertainers to get to that requirement. At this point you have money and you can play the scenario as you would normally do. How many scenarios fall under this category? 92 out of the 146, including all scenarios from the RCT1 base game and nearly all from added attractions, real parks and other parks. I've made them green here so that we can keep track of which scenarios we have shown are possible. There are two things still to address with these parks though. Firstly, you do need an already existing path piece in front of the park entrance in order for guests to be able to enter the park. This is not a problem, as there are only 2 scenarios in the combination of both games that don't have this, and both are still possible. One of them is Skyscrapers, which does have plenty of deletable paths elsewhere in the park in order to afford a path piece for where it matters most. The other one we will see later. Secondly, there are a few scenarios such as Alton Towers that have a massive loan at the start that causes you to pay a lot of interest, potentially making this strategy not feasible. However, all of those scenarios also fall under the second easy category, which are the scenarios that start you out with a fully functional park. Even though you pay nearly 8,000 euros a month in loan interest in Alton Towers, the park that's already there allows you to charge big for the park entrance, and if you need money you can just remove some rides or scenery. For this category I count any scenario that has a functioning ride that guests can reach and go on. You can either make money by charging for the ride or park entrance, or remove the ride to build a better ride in a better position. Most of these start out with multiple rides or one quite big ride, making it very obvious that it is possible to get out of debt. However, there are a few where it's not so obvious, as you do start with quite little, so I do want to take a closer look at those scenarios individually, starting with Woodworm Park. This park has just a single railroad, which probably won't be that profitable. However, you can charge surprisingly much, over €8, which will make you enough money quite quickly. If that doesn't take your fancy, you can also sell it for nearly €4,000 and build a whole bunch of swinging ships and charge several bucks for each. Urban Jungle starts with just one observation tower that is quite far away from the park entrance. If you charge as much as you can for this, it can make enough money, but if that's too risky for you, then you can also remove it and the path leading up to it. This leaves you with a budget of around €1,000, and that is plenty for a micro corkscrew coaster, which is overpowered as hell and will make you enough money. Electric Fields has an even worse ride with a boat hire that has a terrible throughput and sells for only €116, but there is about €3,000 of path available to be deleted, which can buy you plenty of rides and ads. Bumbly Bazaar technically has no rides, but it does have some stalls, which you can sell for enough to build a small profitable junior coaster. Those were all the tricky ones, which are just a few of the 29 scenarios in this category, which I have marked in yellow here. Of course, plenty of green scenarios could fall under this category too, but let's not make it too complicated. Just one category per scenario, please. There are now just 25 of the 146 scenarios left, of which just 7 come from RCT2, so let's start by taking a look at those. First up is Crazy Castle, where you charge for the rides but start with none. You do, however, start with loads and loads of scenery and path, allowing you to make plenty of money to build some rides and get your park going. Actually, this makes for a great third category, called Plenty of Scenery and Path. If you can earn at least €600 by removing pre-built path and scenery, then you will have enough for a ride to kickstart your financial journey. Outside of Crazy Castle, this category contains Ghost Town with some path and big scenery items, Great Wall of China with a massive amount of path and scenery to be removed up the mountain, Inca Lost City where you can remove most of the old Aztec pyramid as you do have construction rights there, and Stone Age, which even has a real life caveman for you to sell. Inca Lost City is the other scenario without a path piece in front of the entrance, but due to the pyramid money this isn't a problem. Fun fact, whereas in Extreme Heights you get a nice and hefty €110,000 if you enable money, that is nothing compared to the Great Wall of China where you get over 5 million. Doesn't make any difference here of course, but it's still quite odd. Despite a lot more scenarios still being on the table in RollerCoaster Tycoon 1, only 2 of the 18 remaining ones in the first game have more than €600 in deletable stuff. Terror Town has plenty of path in the town that is said to be of terror, and Volcania scrapes by with just 84 deletable path pieces, not counting the one in front of the park entrance, as you'll want to keep that one. This leaves us with 18 scenarios where you start with no rides or stalls, can get very little money from deleting stuff, and either charge for the rides or charge for the park entry and are not allowed to advertise. We'll go through all of these one by one to see how we can start making money and solve it, starting with Botany Breakers. Here you can get €220 from deleting some path and nothing more. What ride could you possibly build for that? Not many, I'll tell you that, but you can afford a maze, and the maze is available. Just put it down and you'll slowly start making money. There is no deadline in this scenario, so you have all the time in the world. The next one, Rainforest Plateau, is actually quite difficult. You can get up to €540 from deleting path, but a lot of that is in a very narrow space where you can't easily build a ride. A maze would fit, but you don't get that in this scenario. You do get the Ferris wheel though, which is the only other ride that you can fit in here, but it can't make enough money to offset the 30% interest on the €10,000 loan. Luckily, we don't have to worry about fitting the ride in that space, as we have a massive pair of pliers on our hands. We can simply build a better ride on top of the plateau and manually move some guests to it. We have the corkscrew coaster available from the start, so a micro corkscrew is perfect and even cheaper than the Ferris wheel that we built previously. With a maximum ticket price of over €9, we can quickly start making money with it and build a second one, followed by a cash machine so that guests won't run out of money. A little while later we have enough to build a new path from the entrance to the top of the mountain, and the rest is now easy. This may seem like a lot to do, but you can do it all in less than 2 months, which is barely anything on a 4-year goal. That was the final RollerCoaster Tycoon 2 park, meaning we have now shown that you can indeed beat RollerCoaster Tycoon 2 when starting every scenario with no cash. But what about RollerCoaster Tycoon 1? Well, let's start with Pickle Park, the last unsolved added attractions scenario. You can actually charge for the park entry here, but advertising is forbidden, which is why it did not fall under the first category. It's still not too difficult though. You can delete 3 path pieces to build a maze, and plenty of guests that you can extort will come to the park, and within a month you'll be well on your way. And with that one done, now we're only left with a bunch of scenarios from the Loopy Landscapes expansion. In this expansion you can no longer choose for which you charge, and all scenarios are set to only charge for the rides. The first unsolved one, Arid Heights, immediately seems very tricky as you start with very little. However, you can remove 3 path pieces, build a maze and make money via the tickets for that maze. Here in OpenRCT2 I can only charge €1.80 for this maze, which is enough. But in RCT1 Vanilla you can charge much more, up to $7.20, making it a lot easier. This is because of a change in the calculation for the maximum ride ticket price, which makes it so that you can charge much less for very new rides with very low stats in OpenRCT2 compared to Vanilla. After 13 months they're both the same, but in this challenge we mostly work with new rides. I'll link a video with a full explanation of how this works and what the differences are in the description. Razor Rocks is another tricky one, as you only get €60 to work with and no maze. You can research the maze while dodging the payments for that research, so you have it for free, but you will be paying loan interest and you probably won't be able to afford it by the time that you get it. No problem though, as we do get the steel mini coaster right from the start. If we build a single station piece and put it in reverse incline mode, we can open it and make money with it. Guests will pay anything for an untested ride, so we can charge €20 and very quickly make some money. The ride will crash whenever it does depart, so we'll have to force it to wait until full load and then double close it to force the guests off before it actually goes. It might take a while for the first guests to go on it, as they have a very low chance of actually going on an untested ride that can register G-forces, but once they do you'll stop being broke in no time. Up next is Crater Lake, which we can do very similarly to Razor Rocks, just with the boat hire instead of the steel mini coaster. This goes much faster, as the boat hire cannot record G-forces, so guests will always ride an untested one. It's a similar story with Dragon's Cove. The €500 you can get from removing path is plenty to build either a flat ride or build an untested tracked ride that you can charge $20 for. Grand Glacier, Dusty Desert, Icarus Park and Venus Ponds all have very few path pieces to sell, but it's enough to afford the steel mini coaster station, which is available in all 4 scenarios. Tiny Towers does not have the steel mini coaster available, but it does have enough path to allow you to afford a micro corkscrew coaster, for which you can charge over $9 a ticket. Pacifica has both the maze and the steel mini, so you have options. Lastly, Icicle Worlds only has 4 path tiles in the park, of which you want to delete only 3, as keeping the one in front of the entrance is vital. This gives you just €30, but that is enough to afford the maze, which you do have access to. You will have to pick up and relocate guests for a while until you have made enough money to afford a path connection from the maze exit back to the entrance, but after that it will all go very smoothly. Those were the 14 scenarios where you can't get much money from deleting stuff, but it's enough to afford a ride and use that to make more money, and I have marked those here in purple. That only leaves 4 scenarios to still be solved, which are Crazy Craters, Octagon Park, Pleasure Island and Micro Park. The first 3 of those are pretty much identical. You have 2 pieces of path available to delete, which only gives you 20 euros, and that is not enough to afford any ride, as the maze is the cheapest functioning ride with a cost of 27 euros. You could wait for some guests to enter the park and then delete the 3rd piece of path to afford the maze, but guests cannot go on a ride unless they are on a piece of path. So, unfortunately, there is nothing we can do to beat these scenarios. They don't have a deadline, and for Crazy Craters we can afford 1 track piece to keep the rating above 700, so we won't lose either, but we can't do better than an Eternal State of Limbo in these 3 scenarios. This now only leaves Micro Park, which has nothing in it at all, except for 1 single path piece that we cannot delete if we want guests to be able to enter the park. And we can indeed get some guests, but we cannot even afford 1 single scenery item to entertain them, let alone something that actually makes us money. Micro Park is very obviously unbeatable, and since it's a timed scenario, we will also properly lose when the end of year 3 arrives. So that's it. Out of the 146 scenarios in RollerCoaster Tycoon 1 and 2, there are only 4 that you cannot beat if you start out with no money, and they're all from loopy landscapes. They are Crazy Craters, Octagon Park, Pleasure Island and Micro Park. We can manage to not lose the first 3, but Micro Park is truly a lost cause. To see if you can beat the RCT1 base game without building any path, click right here. Thank you all for watching and I will see you in the next video.